Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we have my October reading wrap up. I'm not talking to you. Well, October was a really good reading month for me. I read 20 books for the month. I read 20 books for the month, which is like a record for me for the year. I don't think I've ever read that many books in an entire year before. I had 9 of those were 5-star reads, and I had 4 4-star reads, and 5 3-star reads, 2 2-star reads, 1 DNF, which I didn't include in the 20 books read. Most of these, almost all of them were romance or paranormal romance. I don't think I read any fantasy romance. I did read 1 YA, and I also read 1 book of poetry, which was basically a novel in verse, so I don't know that it's technically a book of poetry, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, to start out, we're going to talk about the book that I DNF'd. So the book I DNF'd was Up in Smoke by Tame. I was really in the mood to read some dark romances. I saw this on Kindle Unlimited and I just thought I would give it a try. It sounded really interesting. I also was looking for some enemies to lovers books, and this was on a couple of lists that I found. And I liked the writing style. I think that T.M. Fraser is a writer that I would be interested in trying again. This was the first book that I had read from her. This book is basically about a man named Smoke who is trying to get revenge on a man who was responsible for killing, I'm not sure if it was his wife or his girlfriend. In the opening scene, kills her, and she was also pregnant with their child, and it was very, very gruesome. The description was honestly really gut-wrenching. It was pretty sad and awful, and so Smoke is trying to get revenge on this man who he thinks is responsible for that. And so to do that, he kidnaps his daughter. And his daughter is 17, so it's basically like a captor-captive, definitely enemies to lovers type of romance. And I read this until I was almost halfway through, and I just didn't, it was too much hate. Like, there was so much hate between the two of them that I just honestly, at that point, I couldn't see a romance really developing, and it was starting to get into a physical relationship, and it was just very like a hate sex type of thing, and I just wasn't in the mood for that at all. I didn't really like it, and also that she was 17, like, he takes her from high school, and I was just like, no, like, it just wasn't for me. I haven't seen very many of my friends read this, but I just decided I was gonna DNF it. So one of my 2-star reads was actually Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore, which I know is extremely popular and very well loved. This was a buddy read that I was doing with Rosie and Lana, and I'll link their YouTube channels down below. We decided that we would read this together, and we had some really great discussions. They especially had some really great insights into this. It was really interesting to see their different points of view, but we all kind of pretty much agreed that we didn't care for this. I think Lana actually gave it the harshest review, but I just honestly, okay, so this book is about Annabelle, who is she's a part of the women's suffrage movement, and she meets the Duke, Sebastian, and she's trying to get him to work for their women's suffrage cause, and so they have a little bit of a hate to love too. But I just honestly, I couldn't really get behind their relationship. It was very much driven by lust. I couldn't really feel like their relationship had any emotional basis, and I wasn't really a fan of that. I also really feel like the feminist aspect of this book wasn't handled as well as I would have liked. I feel like Annabelle gave up on her, feminist rights and movements for love very quickly, in my opinion, and it really just sort of fell flat for me on the feminist romance and on the romance. I just feel like it was just a really big disappointment. I had really high hopes for this one, and I just kind of was let down. And honestly, I do feel like if I hadn't read a book that was, if I hadn't read The Rake Hess by Scarlett Peckham, which handles that sort of like forbidden love and the feminist aspect of that so well, I feel like anytime I hear of any, especially a historical romance that's billed as like a feminist romance, I compare it to that, and that one is really the gold standard in my opinion, and this was just a huge step down for me, so I didn't really care for it. And my other 2-star read was a novella. This is The Power of Hades by Eliza Rain. I read this for the Paranormal Romance Readathon, and this was the group read. This is basically sort of like a modern day retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth. And so we have Persephone, who is taken to the underworld to be a participant in the trials underworld to try and win the position of Hades' bride. She's kidnapped by Zeus and taken down there. This was really lacking in character development for me. I couldn't feel any connection really to the characters. It was really not even much of a romance. They had very little time together. I think they kissed one time. We actually didn't even really see Hades very much. We didn't know anything about him, and I just felt like I was not emotionally invested enough to care about the plot in this one. So this was another miss for me. Okay, and now on to my 3-star reads. So the first 3-star read that I had was A Duchess a Day by Karis Michaels. This was an ARC provided by NetGalley, and I liked this one. I thought this one was really fun. So this is sort of like it's almost a retelling of Snow White, but not very precisely. It has like Snow White elements in this. So this is basically, we have the huntsman, whose name is Declan, and we have Helena, who is the heroine. And Declan has been hired to be like her bodyguard, but it's basically meant to make sure she doesn't escape this marriage that she has between her and a duke that their families have arranged so that it can be like advance their social standings and bring their families together. It's going to be a good political match. And Helena does not want to marry him at all, so she keeps trying to escape and not commit to this wedding, so Declan is supposed to make sure that she goes through with it. Him and Helena fall in love, and they sort of have this agreement that they're going to find a duchess every single day to try and tempt the Duke to want to marry this new duchess instead of Helena. This was a really cute book. It was really fun. I did enjoy it a lot. I felt like the only reason I gave it a 3 stars because I felt like their romance, their love story was a little bit too fast for me. It wasn't quite as believable as I wanted it to be, and the ending was resolved a little too quickly. But overall, this was a really cute, fun historical romance. And if you're interested at all in the Snow White retelling, definitely check this out. It comes out this month in November. I'll put the date on the screen. I can't remember when it comes out. And the next book I read was part of the Fall for Joanna Shoup read-along with Dana and Kelly, and this month we read the Knickerbocker series by Joanna Shoup. This is her first Gilded Age series, and the first book in that series was Magnate. So this book is basically so it's in Gilded Age New York, so this is late 1800s, and we have Emmett, who is a steel tycoon, basically. He has a great fortune that he's built from his steel empire. And we have Lizzie, who wants to be like a stockbroker. She wants to have her own business. So she approaches Emmett to try and get him to financially back her because she really has a good eye and a good mind for stock trading. But come to find out, they find themselves in a little bit of a compromised situation where they are required to marry, so she will not be ruined. So there's a marriage of convenience too in this book. I honestly did enjoy this a lot. I really liked Emmett. There were parts of this book where I just loved him, and then there were other parts of this book where I wanted to smack him. And Lizzie was a really great heroine too. I feel like I loved seeing that she was smart, that she wanted to have a career. I really did enjoy their relationship, and there was one scene in particular where they're stuck in a building in a snowstorm, which was spicy meatball, wonderful, very good. But there were just a few things with Emmett's behavior that I just sort of was like, man, I wish you hadn't done that, you know? But overall, this was really a good read. I enjoyed it. I really love this series. This is not my favorite book in the series, but I did enjoy it a lot. And the next 3-star read that I have is actually the 3rd book in that series, and that is Mogul. So this book follows Calvin, who is like a very successful newspaper man, and Lillian, who is basically just a really wealthy young woman who is used to living a life of privilege and excess, and she's a really classy, wonderful woman. Like, I really loved her character a lot. So she's also basically running her father's business, who had just passed away. So this book started out with one of the best first chapters that I have ever read. It instantly hooked me. It was freaking off the wall exciting. Like, I was reading this and I was like, what just happened? Like, it was so good. It was so good. So that set the stage for me to have like extremely high hopes for this book. And I thought this was a really, really clever book. I thought the plot was really complex and interesting. Like, I feel like that's something Joanna Shupe does really well, is she has really strong plots that aren't just necessarily based on the romance, and it's just so interesting to read. It's really, really enjoyable. I love that aspect of it. There were a few things that I didn't love about their relationship. It just seemed like, I don't know, I like, again, sort of like with Emma in the first book, like, it wasn't necessarily that I had some issues with their relationship, and without going into spoilers, I feel like I can't really tell you what exactly they were. I did love this couple a lot, but I don't feel like their love at the end was as redeemed as I wanted it to be for me to be completely on board with them. But it was still a really enjoyable book and a great addition to the series. The next book that I read was actually one that I pulled out of my TBR jar for October, and that was Finding Baba Yaga by Jane Yolen. This is a really short novel written in verse, and it's all about the myth of Baba Yaga. So this is also another blend of like a modern day world with the old Russian mythology that's sort of blended together. So this follows a young woman who, she's a teenager, she's a runaway. She comes from an abusive family. Her father is a preacher and is very abusive to her in a very closet type of way, and it deals a lot with those issues of, you know, like religion and how it can kind of push and pull families apart if it's not handled with love, which I always find that really interesting to read, if at times it's also pretty heartbreaking. So she runs away and she finds Baba Yaga. And it's really, there's very little plot in this book. It's a very short book, but the plot is really not there. It's really more an exploration of the themes of the parent-child relationship, and there is some sibling interaction here. We get to see some other really famous Russian mythical creatures. You know, we get to see Vasilisa the Beautiful, we see Koshchei the Deathless, Ivan. We see all of those characters here intermingling, and it's really more about the themes of it. Another theme is that bittersweet transition from childhood to adulthood and sibling love and relationships. It was really a powerful little book, but the ending was definitely not satisfying, and I felt like the first half of this was really emotionally powerful, and the last half of it kind of fell a little short. So it was really fun. I'm glad I read this. It filled my prompt for the TBR jar of a book less than 200 pages. It was interesting. I liked it. Okay, and the last 3-star book that I have is To Tame a Highland Warrior by Karen Marie Moning. This was also one from my TBR jar that I pulled out, and this was for the prompt of reading a book from one of my historical romance mystery boxes. I was really excited to get to this one because I love Karen Marie Moning's Fever series. So this book is about Grimm, who is a berserker, and basically that's what he's just like, this really exceptional warrior, like a very fantastical, indestructible warrior. But when he goes into his berserker mode, he sort of loses all sense of who he is, and he could kill anyone around him, even like a wife or child even. Like, it's just kind of, he goes berserk. But nobody knows that he's a berserker. So he had like a childhood relationship with Jillian, who is the heroine, and they sort of had a little love, which you don't hear in this book, so I'm wondering if we get more of that in the first book. This is the second book in the series. But Grimm ends up receiving a message from Jillian's father that says, please come home, Jillian needs to be married. But Jillian's father sent those messages to several other men who are all there trying to fight for her hand. Not like fight in a real way. They're trying to win her hand, I guess. So I really enjoyed this. This was very fast-paced. This was really one of those that sucked you in and just kind of was so enjoyable to read. You didn't want it to end. I really love Karen Marie Moning's writing. It was a really fun book. I, however, wasn't 100% on board with their romance. It was a little too quick to go straight from attraction to love, and like I said, that might be because they're mentioned in the previous book, and so I didn't have that background of their relationship here. And I also really didn't love the way that the heroine was written. She seemed very, very generic. She didn't really seem as strong of a female character as I typically like, and I just... It definitely felt like it was a 1990s heroine type of formulaic, and that just... I just don't really love reading about that, you know? So it was really fun, though. It was a really fun, good read, and if you're wanting something that is really going to take you for a ride, I would recommend this. Okay, and now onto my 4-star reads. So The first 4-star book that I had was Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. I read this as part of a reading vlog that I did of reading Jen from the book Refuge, Swoon-Weary Heroes. I go into a lot of detail on that. I'll have the link to my playlist for my vlogs listed below, where a lot of these books I go into a lot of detail. I really enjoyed this book. I think that I would probably give this 3.5 to 4 stars. I love the relationship between the main characters. We have Angel, who is a prostitute, and Michael, who is a man who he feels has been called or told by God that he needs to marry Angel. I feel like their love story was very sweet and very powerful too. It's basically all about, the overriding theme is about Angel coming and realizing her worth and that God loves her, and that's sort of exemplified in Michael's love for her. This was a really beautiful, slow romance that it was also honestly pretty traumatic. I feel like this is a Christian romance, but it's really quite sad, as Angel's story is not happy at all until the very end. And it was really sad to see the effects of what had happened to her in childhood and her young adult life come into play in her relationship with Michael, but it was a very hopeful and beautiful read, and I really loved Michael in this. Okay, and the next 4-star read that I have is The Rogue of Fifth Avenue by Joanna Shupe. I was on such a Joanna Shupe kick that I decided to go right ahead and read as many of her books as I could. So this is part of her newer series, The Uptown Girls. This is the first book in that series. This is about Frank and Mamie. Frank is a lawyer, and Mamie is a very, rich young woman who has a life of privilege, and she's trying to sort of go after what she wants and kind of break that stereotype of just being a pretty young woman who has parties and stuff like that. So she's sort of also like a modern day Robin Hood, where she thieves from the wealthy to help the poor. Mamie and Frank end up working together, or she asks Frank to help her on a trial for a woman who has been accused of murdering her husband, who was beating her, and so they end up working together through that. I really liked that side plot, like the background plot of the trial, and I thought that it was really cleverly done. It was almost like a legal thriller. It was really, really interesting. I did enjoy Frank a lot. I think he's a great hero. I really loved him. He had so much love for Mamie, and I just adored it. I did find a few things again with his role as the hero at the end that I just didn't like, where he really, it wasn't major, but it was enough for me to give it a 4 instead of a 5-star, where he just wanted to make the decisions for Mamie, and I'm always just sort of like, can you not? You know? But it was really enjoyable. I really loved this. I can't wait to read more of this series. It was 4 out of 5 star for me. Okay, and the next 4-star book that I have is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I did this as a buddy read with my sweet friend Morgan. I'll link her YouTube channel below. This was a really fun buddy read. This is the first YA that I've read in a while. It's been on my TBR forever. This is basically about Louise, who is a witch, and Reed, who is a witch hunter, and they are in a marriage of convenience to try and bring about the greater plot. I really liked this. I thought that it was very well written. It was really fast-paced. It was really fun. I liked the characters a lot. The only reason I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 stars is because I felt like their relationship was a little bit too fast, a little bit too insta-lovey, a little bit, but I still really, really liked it, and it was just a really fun time. It was good. I enjoyed it. I definitely can see why this is so popular. It was really good. I can't wait to read the second one. And the last book in my 4-star reads is The Duke and I. Now, I have an entire reading vlog dedicated to this book alone, and it is full of spoilers. So if you have also read this and you want my very in-depth thoughts, go ahead and check that video out. So this book is about Daphne and Simon. Simon is the son of a duke, and Daphne is the young woman who is trying to, I guess, find a good marriage. She's out, she's trying to find a good marriage. So Daphne and Simon meet, and they sort of have this friendship, this instant, this connection with each other, and they decide to have this fake relationship where they are together, and it's known in society, or it's expected in society, that Simon will propose to Daphne. And they do that so that Simon doesn't get bombarded with all of the young debutantes who are looking to marry a duke, and so that Daphne can potentially find a good husband who sees that she's, potentially gonna be married to the duke, and they see that and they think, hey, maybe I want to get my chance with her. So I honestly loved this book. It was so, so, so enjoyable to read. Their love story was so sweet and so tender, and it was just also really, really heartbreaking a little bit at times. I enjoyed the banter in this so much. I can see why Julia Quinn is known for her banter. This book was downright funny in places, and it was so sweet. And another thing I feel like Julia Quinn did really well here is she balanced that line between sort of like heavy moments and light moments really, really well. And so I feel like this book has so much more depth than some people give it credit for, because I feel like she really goes into some deep and dark topics that are really great to discuss and to read about. And I will say there is definitely a trigger warning in here for consent. And so if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about, but I do want people to be prepared if they go into this. There are definitely some issues with consent in here, and that's ultimately why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. All right, now we're on to my 5-star read. So the first 5-star read that I had was The Duke I Tempted by Scarlett Peckham. You all know how much I love Scarlett Peckham. She's one of my favorite writers. I adore what she's doing with historical romance. I think she is fantastic. She writes a really, really gritty, dark historical romance that really focuses on a lot of important social issues too. And I love when authors do that in a way that doesn't ever feel preachy or pedantic or too thematic even. I feel like she gets that blend of storytelling with powerful themes just perfect. It's so good. I loved this book. 5 out of 5 stars. This book is about Poppy, who is trying to grow her exotic nursery business. Like, she loves growing trees and plants, and she's really trying to make a name for herself in that world. And we also have the Duke of Westmead, who is honestly only looking for a bride so he can produce an heir. So the Duke and his sister find Poppy, and they decide to hire her for their gardener to decorate and build this extravagant indoor garden for a ball where they hope to find the Duke a bride. But the Duke has a lot of real trauma in his past and a lot of things that he's really struggling with, and he has some secrets that he doesn't want anyone to find out. And as those were revealed throughout the book, it really created so much empathy in me, and seeing their relationship grow and develop between at first it was just an agreement they were going to marry, and then they had chemistry and they like each other, and then see that slowly build over time into love was just so beautiful and so lovely. And I felt like the message in this book of really the effort that you put in to overcoming the struggles or the trauma that you have is worth so much was just perfect. And I loved this book. It was amazing. All right, the next book, 5-star book that I read was Truth or Beard by Penny Reed. This book was so much fun. I freaking loved it. So this book is about Jessica James and Dwayne. So Jessica James and Dwayne have known each other their whole life. Dwayne is actually a twin, and Jessica has had a crush on Dwayne's brother her whole life. So they end up meeting one night. Jessica's under the impression that it's Dwayne's brother, not Dwayne, and they make out. There are lots of sparks. It's really awesome. And then come to find out it was actually Dwayne, the guy that she didn't like. They have this sort of hate to love, animosity between each other. This book was just the perfect This book was just the perfect romantic comedy. It was so fun. It was so funny. It was so swoony. Dwayne just absolutely adored Jessica and worshipped her and wanted her to be his woman, and I just freaking loved it. It was the happiest book that I've read in a long time. So good. I swear every time I do a long video, my camera battery dies. I don't think I'm in the same place, but the next book that I read that was a 5-star is Lies and Lullabies by Serena Bowen. This was a buddy read with my friend Jen from the Book Refuge. I'll have her channel linked down below. This book was just so sweet and happy, and I just loved it. So this is a rock star romance with the secret baby trope, which I know is probably going to turn a lot of you off just by saying that, but you gotta read it because it's so happy and it's so sweet and their love is so good. So this is basically about Kira, who is a young woman who meets Jonas, who is the rock star, when he comes to her small town one summer. They develop a relationship at first that is really more of a friendship. They have feelings for each other, but they don't really act on them until the night before he is supposed to leave. So he leaves, she doesn't have any way to contact him, and 9 months later, she has a little baby. So then several years later down the road, they end up meeting again, and that's when she is finally able to admit to him that they've had this baby together, and just watching their relationship, and Jonas was just so sweet with her, and he was so loving, and he was so patient, and honestly all of the side characters in this book, I just loved them. Like, I loved her brother, I loved the band manager. I didn't necessarily love other members of the band that Jonas was in, but they're in future books that I plan to read, so I'm hoping that they get a little bit of a redemption arc. But this book was just so happy and just so fun, and if you want anything that's sort of lighthearted, heartwarming, sweet, check this book out. It was fantastic. And the next book that I read that I gave 5 stars, which is probably going to definitely be on my favorite books of the year list, and which I actually did an entire review video dedicated to this book, is Baron by Joanna Shupe. So this is the second book in the Knickerbocker trilogy. This is again the Gilded Age historical romance. This book was perfection. It was so freaking good. So in this book we have Will, who you see in the first book, which is Magnate, which has Emmett and Lizzie. And Will is a railroad baron, so he is extremely wealthy, and he's actually running to be lieutenant governor in that year's governor race. And then we have Ava, the heroine, who is a medium, and she is trying to support her family. She's got her siblings, their parents died from illness, and she's trying to support their siblings by building this name for herself as a medium, so she's doing pretty well with that. So Will and Ava meet one night at a seance, I think, that she's having for the governor who's running in the race with Will. Will is very concerned about how this potential governor is so involved in this medium world, and he doesn't want there to be any scandal. So him and Ava really butt heads and have a very hate to love at first. But they also have this electric attraction together, and it is just so enjoyable. It was so wonderful to see Will, who you really dislike in the first book, just be completely redeemed by his extreme love that he has for Ava. He treats her like a queen. Their relationship was perfection. I love this book. This book was so, so, so good. I love it. So I really hope other people will read it so I can gush about it to them, because it's perfect. And the next 5-star book read that I have is To Beguile a Beast by Elizabeth Hoyt. I read this in part of my vlog series about reading books that I bought for their stepbacks. This book, oh my gosh, I adored this book. So this book is sort of has a Beauty and the Beast aspect to it. We have Alistair, who is a scarred hero. He was sent to the colonies, and he comes back really disfigured and scarred. He's missing one eye. He's really had some trauma that happened to him. But he's also a very brilliant horticulturist, and so, or maybe not horticulturist, he's like a naturalist. So he is a writer of all these naturalist books, and he's really interested in the natural world and animals, and it's really, that's pretty interesting about him too. And then we have Helen, who is the mistress of a duke who has 2 children by that duke, who has escaped from him and is trying to just have her freedom and be free of him and find her own happiness. She tries to find a job, so a friend of hers got her a job as a housekeeper for Alistair. So she shows up to Alistair's house one night in the rain, in the storm, and just says, "Hey, I'm your housekeeper." And he's like, "No, I didn't hire a housekeeper, but you can come in anyway because I'm not going to send you out in this rainy, stormy mess." So eventually she does end up staying and working as his housekeeper, and they fall in love, and it is just such a beautiful, wonderful book. I loved this. It was just perfect. It's one of my favorite romances that I've read this year. It was fantastic, and it has made me a huge fan of Elizabeth Hoyt from now on. Okay, and the next 5-star book that I have is Culti by Mariana Zapata. Oh, I've had this on my TBR forever, and I'm always put off by just how big that it is. But the audio was still on Audible Escape, so I used that before it went away to listen to this book, and I loved this book. I admit there was a time when I was reading this when I was about a third of the way through where I felt like, I don't know if I'm gonna love this or not. I don't know, because it definitely has a little bit like Saul, the heroine, or the female main character. She has a little bit of a bathroom sense of humor, and I'm just sort of like, I'm not 12. I'm not a 12-year-old boy, you know? Anyway, but, oh, okay. I just loved it so much. So this book is basically about Saul, who is a professional soccer athlete, and Ray Culti, who is this legendary soccer star, he comes to coach her team, and they have a very strong hate to love relationship at first. There is definitely an age gap in here. Ray, I think, is in his late 30s, so I could kind of relate to that as well, but we'll get to that in a minute. And Saul, I think, is in her mid-20s. I think she's like 25. And she has had a crush on Ray since she was a little girl. Like, she had his posters in her room, just loved him and worshipped him, and of course she can't ever let him know. I loved Saul as a character. I feel like she is one of my favorite female characters because she has just the right blend of, like, protectiveness of her family, won't take any crap from Ray at all. Like, she calls him out on stuff all the time. She is a really strong athlete. She has a really strong work ethic, but she's also really tender with her family and has, you know, she has all of that tenderness inside, but she's also not afraid to, like, put people in their place if they're pissing her off or hurting her family, and I love that. And Ray is really, he's really the epitome of a grumpy hero. Like, he is so grumpy, like, you kind of hate him. And so to see him soften towards her towards the end, and when they say this is a slow burn, like, they ain't kidding. Yeah, so then my memory card got full, so I'm back. I'm sorry if I'm in a different spot. Clearly I didn't plan for this video very well. Okay, so then when they say slow burn about this book, like, they are not kidding. Like, the slow burn in this, so slow, right? But I feel like she did a really good job of really making you invested in the story too. So I was really impressed with that. And I just really, really loved this book. I loved watching Culti, Ray, just be a complete soft little biscuit for Saul once he finally acknowledged out loud that he loved her. It was just so good. It was so perfect. And I really feel like I loved this book, and I'm going to tell you why. So, I'm an athlete. I'm a strength athlete. I don't know if you know that or not, but I feel like that there are very few books written about the female athlete experience as far as something that I can relate to that isn't necessarily something that is gender stereotypical for women to do, like dancing or something like that. So to see Mariana Zapata really talk about the female athlete experience here as far as Saul, how she lifts weights and how she approaches her training and how she's, you know, it's a priority to her and she's super interested in it, and like just how she puts that first and how she adjusts like her meals and her rest and everything. I just could relate to that so much, and I really, really loved seeing that on the page here. Like, I felt seen, if that is okay. Like, I just really, really loved the way that she wrote about the female athlete experience in here, even to the point where, like, Saul was talking about how she had sometimes been told that she has too much muscle, and some people said that she didn't have enough, and it was just, and how comfortable she is with her body because of what it can do. I just loved that so much. It was so good. And I just really wish that I had more books like that I knew of, because that itself endeared this book to me, because it is everything that I feel too, and I just really loved it. So 5 stars. This was perfect. Loved it. And the next book on my 5-star list is One Good Earl Deserves a Lover by Sarah MacLean. I also have a complete reading vlog dedicated to this book. I love it. Sarah MacLean always delivers. I adore her books. This is one of my favorite books of all time now. This couple is perfection. I love them. So, this book follows Pippa and Cross. Pippa is sort of an odd young woman in that she is definitely more intellectual. She's really looking to use her brain. She's interested in horticulture and astronomy, and she loves her animals, she loves her dogs, and she is engaged to be married within 14 days. But before she gets married, she wants to be ruined. So she seeks out Cross, who has a wonderful reputation with the ladies, to fulfill that ruination for her. And Cross is not interested in, he doesn't really want to ruin her, but he is definitely intrigued with her and very attracted to her, and I just adored their love story. This book was just so good. I go into a lot of detail about this. I tabbed the heck out of it because there were so much in here that I want to never forget and that I feel like are really good talking points, and was just perfect. So check out that reading vlog if you want my in-depth thoughts on this. And the next book that I read that was a 5-star read was Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. This was recommended to me by Jen from the Book Refuge. I know she absolutely loves this book, and oh man, did I ever love this book too. So I want to start out by saying that this is a very dark romance. This has quite a lot of trigger warnings in it. I would say trigger warnings for sure for rape, abuse, torture, infertility. This book is not afraid to go to dark places and dark themes and really put them on the page. But this book is so good and so powerful, and I love their relationship. I love the resiliency of Bennett, the female pirate in the book, the main character. It's just so good. Like, this is one of those books that when I finished reading it, I knew I was never going to forget this book. Like, it just, like, worked its way into my soul. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was fantastic. So this book is basically about Bennett, who is a woman pirate. Her father was a pirate, and the book starts with her childhood, and you see what led her to become a pirate herself. And she is also married to a pirate lord named Priest. So Priest has betrayed her in her mind, and she is trying to find a way out of that marriage. And then we have Lord Ashley, who is a pirate hunter who captures Bennett. So it's really this complex relationship between Bennett and these two men. It's just so good. Like, I feel like I can't really go into the details of this plot without giving stuff away that I feel like you would really, if you feel okay with those dark themes, I think it would be better to just go in and read it, because it's, as they're revealed and as the relationships are sort of unraveled, it's just such a immersive and total reading experience. It was just unforgettable and good, and I feel like I have wasted all my words on all these other books because I can't adequately express how much I loved this book. It was fantastic. It was definitely, honestly, this is one of the darkest books that I have ever read, but it was freaking good. And the last book that I read for the month was Dark Needs at Night's Edge by Cressley Cole. This is, I believe, book 4 in the Immortals After Dark series. This is a series of paranormal creatures as they are going to find their fated mates. It's wonderful. I have loved every book in the series. I think this is probably my new favorite. So this book follows Conrad, who is a vampire. He is the brother of Sebastian, who we know in book 2, and Naomi, who is a ghost. So the book starts out with Conrad being brought to this mansion that is haunted by Naomi, and his brothers are like chaining him and tying him up there to try and get him to overcome this madness that they believe that he's in. But he ends up being the first person to be able to see Naomi, and they end up having the most beautiful, sweet, heartbreaking love story that I was completely unprepared for, and it was just so great. Like, I've used all my adjectives. I'm out of adjectives. I don't know how to describe this book anymore. I did vlog about this in, I think, days 1 and 2 of my paranormal romance reading vlogs. It was just, honestly, their love story was so powerful and so sweet, and I literally felt like my heart was breaking at one of the final scenes in this book, and I was on the verge of tears. It was just so good. Honestly, I adore this series. I love it to death. It's so freaking good. It was fantastic. So, that's all the books I read for the month of October. Let me know if you have read any of those and what you thought. If you disagreed with me, or if you agreed with me, that's okay too if you disagreed with me. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.